Israel is having troubles keeping people from becoming homeless. More and more people are becoming homeless in the so-called startup entity. Over 1.8 million people are living below the poverty line there. That's 20% of the Israeli population, including 1 million children. Economic difficulties and troubles finding work has pushed over 1/4 of the Israeli population below the poverty line. Israel has the highest poverty rate of all 36 members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Israel continues to remain among those with the highest levels of inequality. One of the main issues is that prices just don't stay the same because they're always increasing. This has led many people homeless. According to the Israeli regime, there are almost 100,000 people homeless in Israel, with social services treating only 10% of them as they cannot keep up with their demands. These tents are just meters away from the towers of the capital of Tel Aviv. The site is filled with homeless families who have been there for years and cannot find a way out.
אנחנו מיקרוקוסמוס למה שיקרה פה. אני 3.5 שנים פה. אני מתחנן... לא מפחדים! לא מפחדים! לא מפחדים!
Protests like this have erupted in Israel. These are similar to the so-called Yellow Vest protests that erupted in France. But according to these Israelis, the situation is more dire in downtown Tel Aviv.
מה קרה בצרפת? העלו את מחיר הדלק. תראה מה קרה שם. פה, כל שני וחמישי יש גזרות חדשות. ועכשיו ב1 מעלים לנו את יוקר המחיה יעלה. אבל חברי הכנסת הצביעו והעלו לעצמם את המשכורות ב5,000 שקל לחודש. זה נשמע לך הגיוני?
The big corporations and the big tycoons, they are drinking our money and the government is helping them. We want our government to take all these monopoles and all those corporations and make the game that it's fair game.
First of all, because the corruption of our government, I don't know, they dare to higher the prices of the electricity, the food, the water, everything, to buy a very, very nice and big aeroplane to our corruption prime minister. That's why I'm here. I'm very angry about it.
The yellow vest, it's a great symbol because it symbolizes that there is a global network of citizens that use democracy in order to preserve the rights of living in a fair deal.
This vest is inspiration from France. I hope, I'm praying that we will be the same as they, because it's not enough to shout. That's what I can say.
This was the answer to the demands of the Israeli people. Residents of Tel Aviv and other major cities put on the now symbolic yellow vest and blocked streets as they protested against poverty and increased costs of utilities, taxes, and food, among other things. Hundreds of people have been arrested. This is London, the capital of the UK. It has a sizable Jewish diaspora that
travel. All these things are very expensive in Israel. It's not expensive to fly to the other side of the world, but housing is very expensive. So young people, a bit like in London, cannot find housing. There's lots of young people who are actually living on food banks and, outside, in parks, etc., in tents. So the middle class is gradually getting poorer. Even families where both parents are working full-time are poor, and especially families with 4 or 5 children or more. Bearing in mind that the government is not doing anything to resolve this. For example, subsidizing food, subsidizing housing and massively building social housing, subsidizing transport. Because they're not doing all those things, poverty can only go up rather than down. In the same way, the money from the United States, the $4 billion they get a year, is going into weaponry. So poor people don't see any of it. Actually, most of them work under the minimum wage as well. Even if you work over the minimum wage, many of those families are under the poverty line, because this is not where the money is. The money is in weaponry startup, in security, in producing and training destructive methods of killing people, of spying on people. This is what Israel is spending on. It is not spending on the basics.
A recent study by the Central Bureau of Statistics shows that 460,800 families live below the poverty line. Another study by local NGO group Latet has found that 53% of families did not have enough food. Furthermore, the same study added that 11.7% of poverty-ridden children in Israel were forced to beg for money or had to collect food from garbage cans. Israel is one of the poorest in the world. With the limited to no action from the regime in Tel Aviv, Israel will leave even further behind the Israelis without means of finding a place in society, something that will certainly have more people on the streets, either living or protesting there.